was really just another rapist. And I don't intend to hesitate when asked who was the stronger. Tara, like Assange, knew that carrying the truth would be the hardest labor. Tara knew that her assailant wasn't gonna make us any safer, and knew he's just the type of man to hand a decent foreign leader US printed walking papers, and knew he'd be relentless and aggressive in the war he'd wage upon her very character, that his attempts to weaken and degrade and embarrass her would be her only compensation. But I strongly doubt that anyone could ever have foreseen the stream of hate that came from quote-unquote progressives and the self-styled titans of survivor advocation. So if you really think there's something to be gained out of sharing your pain with the world, you are sorely mistaken. The Biden team just dragged their feet addressing Tara's allegations. Until they had a decent list of smears, then they aired them out on every station. And it turns out no one wants to hear the truth of who they praised as being worthy of such bloated liberal celebration. That no
got Elon Musk on. I also, for a year, I've been following the Uhuru group, the 4 socialists that were arrested, raided by the FBI. I had them on my show last year, and I've been bringing it to attention to independent media. And I had texted him as well about the Uhuru group. And luckily, he did follow up when they were indicted, and he went ahead and talked about them. It was one of his last.
That was an incredible piece. I talked about it today on my radio show with Margaret Kimberly. It's a very chilling development.
Yes, it is.
For someone that just gets back from Russia, even though I paid for my flights and my hotel rooms, I'm still looking over my shoulder. And in that piece that he did on that group makes it sensible that I do look over my shoulder. It's a very scary time that we live in. We had the Red Scare in 1919. We had the Red Scare 2 in 1950s, and now we have the Bear Scare going on. So we live in these very dangerous times. I'm expecting someone to either arrest me or harass me or indict me any day now for what I did going to Russia and into Donetsk.
And let's get right to that. So Randy, you've been an activist for such a long time, and one of the biggest recent activism pieces that you've done that dedicated your life is to Assange and freeing Julian Assange, who is being held at Belmarsh prison now for years and about to be extradited and facing 175 years in U.S. prison, which is abhorrent. And you've been such a great voice. Could you give the audience your website just really quickly, and we'll have it on the lower as well.
It's there too. Assange Countdown to Freedom, spell it out.com or randycredico.com. That leads to Assange Countdown to Freedom.com. And it's 6 years of programs that I've done in support of Julian Assange, including interviews with him, his mother, his father, his lawyers, and so many others. He actually helped launch that program back in 2017 on April 11th. 2 years later, on April 11th, he was renditioned into a what would be the ground floor version of the Tower of London in London. So that's where you can reach me on, at least on that program. Also, you can look at all of my stuff at Randy Credico liveonthefly.com or at WBAI.org archives.
Great. So you and I became acquainted because of the anti-war activism, and also I knew of you, of course, because of Assange, and also your deep and lasting friendship with Roger Waters. And we have some mutual friends, and you decided to go find out what, because Western media has really vilified Russia for a long period of time now. It's been a program that the State Departments and DOJ has been working on, particularly under the Biden administration. So what were your first impressions of Moscow when you got there? And what were some of the myths that got dispelled for you as a Westerner going there?
You're one of the hidden hands of me going over there. Okay, just want people to know that. I went over there. We spoke about this. And what I saw over there in Moscow, just Moscow alone, I'll talk about the other part of the country later. But Moscow was an incredible city, a beautiful city, a shining city on the hill. I was driving today from Albany to New York, and it was potholes every 20 feet. All right, down there are no potholes. You can go to the airport from downtown Moscow, and that's like DME. That's like an hour and a half trip, and there's not one pothole. The city is immaculate, it's clean, and it's on fire. And you would think, with all of these pop-ups that I get from Newsweek and other U.S. state media affiliated organizations, that I would be seeing bread lines, or I would be seeing soup kitchens, or people selling apples. Totally the opposite. The place is on fire. The sanctions have backfired. People are doing well in Moscow. Everybody's working. The traffic is unbelievable, and the roads are beautiful. And every cafe and restaurant that I went to, and I had the freedom to go wherever I wanted. There was nobody looking over my shoulder. I went to nightclubs, and over a couple of week period of time, and it totally destroyed this narrative that Moscow is in Russia is having some kind of economic downfall. And that includes in Rostov, which is on the eastern border, where I went before I went to Donetsk and Mariupol.
That's amazing. The way, and I've heard from my friend Fee, who's she's a correspondent over for RT. She talks a lot about the mass transit because she just uses that every day for work and for, living in Moscow. How did you find the subways?
Oh my God. I took the subway today from here to my radio show in Brooklyn. I took the A train. There are rats on both sides of the track. The
Oh,
walls are dirty, the floors are filthy, and the subways there are like you could eat off the floor like fried eggs.
wow.
And there's no advertising. They're beautiful. They're like, you go to Penn Station or Grand Central,
Right.
you see the high ceilings. It's beautiful there. Well, that's at every station. And I took the mass transit there all the time. You know why? Because there was too much traffic, because the city is busy, and you get there every 90 seconds. There's a subway train every 90 seconds at the most. I got off a train, and 40 seconds later, there was another train going in the same direction. So the subway system is impeccable, and it's like being in the Metropolitan Museum. Each stop, the way the chandeliers and the ceilings, and I've never seen anything like it. And the like I said, the roads are so clean. I've never seen roads clean like this. I've never seen roads without potholes, but in Moscow, there are roads without potholes.
Right. That's really amazing. And I've heard the same thing from several people, that we have a very skewed vision of what Moscow is really like. And I guess I wanted to ask you too about the food. One of the things that Fee talked about was that it tastes different. It has less chemicals. So how did you find it?
I found the food great. I had borscht. I don't like borscht in general, but the borscht there was so good. The food was so wonderful. And I went to this place called the Depot, which has a craft beer, stand there, because because of the embargo, there's no craft beers coming in from outside of the country. So they developed their own craft beer culture. And not just that, the food at this place, Depot, which was jammed, and I've got videos of it, jammed. And they have what you would call prime aged meat. You have like plov, the best plov in the world. You have the best seafood in the world, and you have all of these stands selling retail food in these stalls, and I've never seen anything like it in the U.S. How beautiful the Depot food court is. I wish there was one place in New York that could replicate what I saw there. Seriously.
Right. Well, one of my favorite video clips that I saw on your Twitter handle, which is, if people want to find you, I think it's at Credico.
Credico Randy.
Right.
Credico Randy. Don't do Reade Credico, because that account has been stolen from me.
So one of my favorites was where you were sitting in Red Square and you were smoking a cigar and you just looked very happy.
And I was so, it was spiritual to be in Red Square and sitting there and talking to people who don't hate Americans. They have no animosity towards.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that, Randy, because there's so much Russophobia. It's been so, driven, like Rachel Maddow screeching in people's living rooms for 6 years. And then like last week you had the Boston Marathon where Russian athletes and Belarus athletes were banned from being able to participate. There's such bigotry and bias and racism against Russia. It's just unreal in the West. How do they treat Americans when Americans go there?
They're very, for me, they were very gracious. I sat at the bar at the Marriott Hotel, and they said that the perception that you are getting is a complete falsehood. But they didn't blame the American people. They have no animosity. They have no baleful feelings towards Americans. They like Americans, and they can't believe the false impression that is being portrayed by Western media. But that being said, they were very good with me. And I had an open mind. There were no other journalists that I knew of that were participating in this kind of activity. And then going into Donetsk and Mariupol, there was none at all. They were all going west, like this Wall Street Journal reporter was not going to the war zone where I went. He was going west to expose Russian frailties and possible new weapon systems. So there was nobody going west from where I was in Moscow to Mariupol or to Donetsk. And I got to tell you something, it was a very frightening experience being in Donetsk, that there were HIMARS missiles that had passed us and hit other areas. It could have hit us. I was scared out of my wits the entire time. But I lived through it. I don't know how those people do it, but I can tell you this, they are not going back. They are not submitting to the old guard and the Azov battalions and all these other neo-Nazi groups that are stationed around Donetsk. And
just to educate some of maybe the audience that may not have this in context, you, Randy, went down to the Donbass region, which has been getting shelled by the Kiev regime in Ukraine, by Zelensky, his military, since 2014, has been shelled almost daily, to the point of
daily, not almost daily. When I was there, it was daily. They were hitting open air markets, only civilian population areas, the open air markets, the university there, the church, the Russian Orthodox Church. That's where they were hitting. And these
Ukrainian militias are killing and aiming at civilians and civilians.
Only. No, there's. The only time I felt safe when I was in a meeting with military commanders when I was there, because they weren't hitting that target; they were hitting civilian targets. I was in a restaurant that was 3 floors, and I was very scared because you don't know where to stand when you are there. They are deliberately trying to strike fear in the local population, not so much the military, because they're not going to beat the military. There's no chance that Ukraine is going to win a battle in either Donetsk or Mariupol. That's over. That's land that's never going to be ceded back to Ukraine, which never should have had it to begin with.
And you bring up a good point, and I think our audience should know about the fear that's being struck into that population, which is mostly identifies Russian nationals. The language is Russian, and also the Russian Orthodox Church. So not only is the language being outlawed by the Kiev regime, the Russian language, but also the Russian Orthodox Church, and there's been violence towards the church itself, and monks and nuns arrested. Can you talk a little bit about what you saw and what people were telling you when you were there?
When I was in Mariupol, and I befriended this 19-year-old girl. She could have been my granddaughter. And what she said was that Zelensky was a Nazi comedian, and that she went back. She had friends and family that were, I think you may have a video of her, Valeria, that she was standing strong, and she was standing with them until the very bitter end. She had a makeshift cafe. She made pizza for me and some other French journalists. And no matter where I went, the resolve of the Russian people, which control those areas, they're Russian. In fact, all of Ukraine, let's be honest, is Russian. They all. I said to somebody, I said, those Ukrainians are good fighters, and he said, of course, they're Russian. So there is no such thing as a Ukrainian. That's an entire myth that was created, the state that was carved out for better or worse. But the people there are not going to yield to the violence that the U.S. is supporting. The Heimers, they live with it the same way I live in New York. And I know there's going to be 4 or 5 people pushed into the subway tonight, and maybe last night 8 people killed in the Bronx or in Brooklyn. Wow. But I live here anyway, regardless. And so people have that attitude. They are going to live, and they're going to fight. And if it means giving up their life, they've had so many friends who have died because of these Azov battalions coming in there, trying to suppress the culture and the history of what really is Russia. The DPR, the Donetsk People's Republic, is part of Russia. Donbass is part of Russia. You go to this monument in Donbass. The first thing I did when I arrived in an armored car, I was in an armored car,
okay,
the red zone and the yellow zone and then the green zone, into this area where there's this beautiful monument for those who gave up their lives fighting against Nazis in 1943, 1944 in a tank battle. It's called the Sour Mogila. And on the other side of the hill, there's a number of monuments dedicated to those that fought against the Azov battalion, these neo-Nazis. And everyone wants to dismiss the fact that there are neo-Nazis, there are Nazis, their brethren, the people they look up to are people like Stepan Bandera, who was responsible for 33,000 Jews being killed in Ukraine and 100,000 Poles. And so these are people that fought against that in 2014 when they invaded Donbass. They were able, 17 people were able to repel these 2 battalions there. And so you have this monument, the most incredible monument I've ever seen in my life. And that includes the one with Abraham Lincoln.
That's amazing. And thank you for sharing some of that. And we've been sharing some of the pictures and videos as you've been talking on the live show. One of the fun things about being on the live show is that there's a little audience interaction. So sometimes we're able to get comments or questions. So Reef, did you want to raise up any questions for Randy right now that came through?
Let me look. We've got Bricks versus West. There's a new Grand Central Station that just opened up, built onto the old one, apparently. And someone asks, is there any signed documents that Ukraine is even a nation?
No,
Randy?
It's never been a nation. It's not a nation. Khrushchev gave over, he was from Ukraine, but Ukraine is more of an ideology. It's all Russian. These are Russians fighting Russians. There are no such thing as a Ukrainian. Ukrainians are Russian. It was called Rus for thousands of years. And to think that it's some kind of like independent nation is ludicrous. And, I can be accused of being prejudicial to Russia, but it's historically, it's the truth. There is no such thing as Ukraine. Ukraine was never, something out of 1926, 27. They gave it over and called it Ukraine, but it really is not a separate nation. And I spoke to a 2.5-hour interview with a gentleman who was the head of emergency management in Kiev in 2014. He is Ukrainian. He left and went back to Donetsk. He was very upset by the treatment of Russians in Kiev and the attacks in Donetsk and Mariupol by these Azov neo-Nazi organizations. He was very upset. He is Ukrainian. And so that video interview will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. It was 2.5 hours. but he saw what was happening. He knew it was a coup, and the violence that ensued after the coup against those who oppose the coup and those who oppose the hegemony in Donetsk and Mariupol was so upsetting to him that he didn't switch sides, but he's telling the truth. And I have that 2.5-hour interview coming up in the next couple of days.
Yeah, and I think for our audience too, if they have other questions about history, because you have a really good grasp of it, is to follow your content, but also to watch Igor Lopotonik, who's the director of Ukraine on Fire, in the Oliver Stone film. But Ukraine on Fire really lays out, and then there's several films after, but you can get it. It was banned on YouTube for a while, but you can get it on Rumble, you can get it on other places. Now it's come back. But one thing I wanted to also kind of go into with you, Randy, was that I've been, because we have some mutual friends, like I said, but I also have friends and family and, things. So I kind of know what's going on over there a bit. And one thing that is happening is the Russians are rebuilding some of these areas. So did you get to see any of the rebuilding and what was going on there?
In Mariupol, I was totally astounded because it looked like Dresden. Because there's a thing called the Azovstal, where there's this big steel factory that goes down 4 or 5 floors. They were shelling in Mariupol, and the place looked like Dresden, 1944, 1945. So, but as I was leaving, they took me, the French journalists I was with, to an area where there were I think 8 new apartment buildings. Mm-hmm. Every 3 months, they come up with these units. Can you imagine that in New York? These are what the Mohawks did at Empire State Building back in 1932. The rapidity of building these new units. And these are Central Asian from the Caucasus that are not slaves. They're walking around. I got to talk to many of them, and they're highly paid, but they are incredible construction workers. So they are building apace these new units in Donbass and in Mariupol, and trying to and then actually retrofitting the buildings that are still surviving the attacks from the Azovstal, which were getting advice from NATO members in the Azovstal, just pounding these areas where the Russians came in to liberate it from the thrall of the Azov battalions. And I mean, and everyone I spoke to, I spoke to people that lost their homes, that were shelled by the Azov battalions, and people taken captive and used as hostages. With the Russians from liberating the area. They don't want to be part of Ukraine at all. They don't want to be part of it, of Ukraine. And especially now, if you look at the damage that has been inflicted on Mariupol, you will understand why the people there are now coming back. They're part of this rebuilding process. And if you go from where I was, which is the Donetsk city, down to Mariupol, 50 or 60 miles, there are fields to the right and to the left that are nothing but these IEDs, these explosives out there that the Ukrainians have put out there. So if the car that I was in, which was an armored car, had slipped off the road, we would have been into a minefield that the Azov groups had planted in the road towards, and they're trying to demine it right now. It's not an easy thing to do.
No, it's not. Now, are you aware of the pedal bombs? I had.
That's what I'm talking about. The pedal bombs. I'm really talking. I didn't think of it, but it's the pedal bombs. These are pedal bombs all over, going into Mariupol that were put there by the Azov Battalion or Randy.
Yeah, and to further illustrate to my audience, I don't know if some of the people that follow me may have saw the Ava Bartlett episode, but unfortunately they look very benign from the outside. When you see them, they're small, even look
Please don't eat the daisies.
Yeah, don't eat the daisies. But children, unfortunately, play with them or step on them. I wish that they were banned. And now the UK has sent uranium.
Depleted
uranium. So could you hear anything about that while you were there, or since you've been back, as far as what's going on with that? Because at first they weren't going to do it, and then they did, and now what's happening?
I think it's infuriated. They are not giving up. People in Donetsk and the people of Mariupol, and the chorus I always heard was, how do we stop this and get this over with, short of using nuclear weapons? So people think, now I'm talking about commanders saying that to me. I was in some high-level meetings that they're not going east. They are staying in the west. And so if Biden and the nutcases, the Dr. Strangeloves around him, Victoria Nuland and Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken, they're risking our lives. They're risking the survival of the world to try to recapture this area. It's not going to happen. It will not happen. And if they have to, I know they are in an existential mode right now, Russia. And so if you were in existential mode and the only thing you had to deter the likelihood of being exited out of life were nuclear weapons, you would use them.
Right. I have to be honest, my bias here is this. And Randy, you know me, I'm an author. I'm a person that speaks out about this, a commentator, a geopolitical analyst, if you will. My background is in international relations and that kind of thing, and having my law degree and doing, and analyzing and writing and doing all this.
You have an impeccable background.
Speaking out with Biden. But from my perspective, Vladimir Putin kept us from a nuclear confrontation a couple of times. Like in Syria, when things were really bad and things could have escalated out of control, he did some really good maneuvers there. He's much
more reserved. He's much more restrained than this president.
He is. And they keep saying they want a different leader. But what I would say to them is, I don't think you do, because you don't know what will happen if you do. And he has shown tremendous patience.
He's got 80% support. Our president here, Biden, this zombie, has 20% support. So what platform is he running on to bring back this neocon combo to escalate the conflict in Ukraine? What does he have to offer?
Right. And you came up at a time too when the Democratic Party was anti-war, right? And
I did.
Now they're the war party.
There was George McGovern. There was Eugene McCarthy. There was Mike Gravel and Bobby Kennedy that were anti-war. That has totally flipped, and that includes the complete hack. AOC. AOC is. Oh, God. I'm actually going to be running in the primary against her, in the Democratic primary against AOC.
Oh, is this an exclusive? Are you announcing this here?
Yes, I'm announcing it right now.
Oh my gosh! Here we go. Well, thank you.
I didn't tell anybody until now. I don't know what it is.
Oh my gosh! So you're running for office.
I'm a Democrat. I am running against AOC in the Democratic primary.
Good for you.
I'm going to win.
Yeah, I will. You know what? I'm down. Reef, I know you must have gotten some comments on that. What are people saying to Randy's announcement that he's going to run? Now, are you going to run?
I don't support a woman that would rather give $100 billion to this corrupt Zelensky drug addict, and instead of giving $100 billion, a piece of that to her area that has a very bad drug problem and put that money into rehab. You know, she should be supporting that. But she's become Nancy Pelosi, and I'm running against Nancy Pelosi, not against
Yeah.
AOC.
Okay, so let's dig in here a little bit, Randy. Because I'm really fascinated by this. So you went and you saw what was really going on with this proxy war that US and NATO is fighting against Russia via Ukraine. So you got that. Emotionally, where did that put you? And how, and when you came back and you saw the news, for instance, I think I shared an article with you yesterday that they've introduced a resolution, not surprisingly, from Joe Wilson, who's like warmonger number one,
but Steve Cohen,
to try to change the borders of Ukraine to 1991, as if the United States has any say in that anyway. But okay, let's go forward. So they're giving permission to Zelensky to use long-range missiles and try to take back Crimea. So you came home to that news. Can you talk to me a little bit about that and then your decision to run?
It's lunacy. When I saw that and you sent it to me, I was really astounded. But Joe Wilson is a nutcase. Steve Cohen is actually some kind of like, legally, philosophically, good guy. But when you see this, that he is signed on, I was wrong in my analysis of Steve Cohen. But we're talking about South Carolina and Kentucky or Tennessee, and they have a lot of people that are involved in the military. And I don't know how much they get, their districts get from a military industrial complex contracts. I don't know, but it's really frightening that AOC didn't come out and denounce that. But forget about it. She's been bad on everything. She's talking about, it's okay to choke off a dissenter like Tucker Carlson. I think that's a very bad thing. And she's somebody that somehow dropped in and she fooled everybody. And I'm dropping in and I'm going to face her and say, why are you spending $110 billion, $150 billion open end to Ukraine? And you have all these potholes, you have all this poverty, you have people in soup kitchens in a district that she represents. It's more important that she gives money to destroy, the situation in Ukraine and Russia than it is for her to put that money and speak out against it and put the money into the pothole Craven West Side Highway and put money into apartment buildings in her district and put money into Medicaid and all of that. I mean, she has totally sold out and she fooled a lot of people. She never fooled me. I always knew she was a fraud. So now I'm being drafted to run against her in the Democratic primary. Don't ask me why I'm a Democrat. I'm kind of embarrassed to say that, but that's where the action is the Democratic primary.
Could you run as an independent? And I
wish after I lose the Democratic primary, I will run as an independent. But
okay,
I need to actually run against her in the Democratic primary to let the people know that she forgot about them and she's more interested in supporting Raytheon and Lockheed, General Dynamics, all these other military industrial organizations, putting money into that rather than supporting the people in her district. She totally sold out and she's going to pay. I'm going to bring that up throughout this campaign.
Yeah. And you know what? We're coming.
You're going to support me?
There's a couple other things that I wanted to get to right as we're, coming to the close here, but I wanted to talk about censorship. Because two things with censorship, what she said about Tucker Carlson, but also bring up the fact of suppression, censorship. There's different things you can do, right? You deplatform, fire people from media. You don't allow, you suppress them. You use social media and weaponize it to suppress them. And you are a good friend, if it's okay for me to say, of Roger Waters, who has been censored, suppressed, attacked. He and I both, as well as Oliver Stone and Igor Lepanek, we're all on the Ukraine kill list.
You're on it too?
Yeah, I'm on it as well. Apparently, Igor and some
badge of honor.
I'm on it. I haven't seen myself on it, but there's a couple of lists. Apparently, I'm on that one. But my point is about censorship and suppression is recently Roger Waters won a case, which was I'd like you to get to. But before you do, if you could talk a little bit about what you touched on, AOC talking about deplatforming Tucker Carlson and deplatforming in general and the Democratic Party and what you're going to try to do to change the, steer the course there differently.
Well, listen, what she said in that interview that has been, going wild on social media is a disgrace that she's supporting deplatforming people that don't agree with her point of view, don't agree. I mean, Tucker Carlson says things that she should be saying. In other words, he's saying it, and it's something that she should be saying if she lived up to the narrative that she gave out when she ran in 2018. But she's totally drifted away from that. She's got her Prius, and she's been totally co-opted, and she's looking at her future.
Her Vogue cover.
She's becoming a young Nancy Pelosi, and not even a Bella Abzug. I wouldn't mind if she'd become kind of a semi-leftist like Bella Abzug.
We lost him. Must be talking about some things that they don't want to talk about, huh? All right, well, let's keep going. Oh, Caleb is here. Is that why he got knocked out? Tell Caleb, huh? That's not why. Okay, let's try to get Randy back.
Yeah, we'll wait for a bit.
Okay.
All right, let me do this.
All right, so so the audience knows we next have Caleb Maupin, who had the distinct pleasure and honor of being able to ask Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, who was visiting the United States and was at the UN Security Council, who was able to ask him some questions. So we'll be bringing Caleb in a moment. I'd like to finish off my thing with Randy. Did he just? I think he might have lost power or lost.
Yeah, I lost the internet. I don't see him yet, but
okay, let's go ahead and bring in Caleb, and when he comes back, let's bring him in, if that's okay. Can you do that?
Yep, and we'll go ahead and head to a be right back screen, and we'll be back everyone. With Caleb, everyone.
We're gonna get Caleb.
Christ, I know that they don't think that we're the brightest, but at least pretend we got a couple lumens.
That might be
Ask yourself if you have ever questioned what they fed you, or do you just shut your eyes and then consume it? And now ask yourself if you ate every one of Biden's lies under guise of harm reduction and the promise of a slight improvement. And now imagine long ago that Biden chose to show you who he really was by traumatizing you for his amusement. Now imagine that you watched him touch a Bible with those filthy hands, and then assume the power of the highest seat in all the land, of knowing your attacker wields a global coalition born of three-letter agencies who'll make a life's mission out of trying to discredit you through lies, damn lies, and collusion. Big tech is never gonna separate from our surveillance state. Fuck's sakes, they're just a breath away from total fusion. So there will come a time where even if you see the light, your voice will never reach the sky through all the bots and all the noise pollution. So trust us when we tell you that the masking of abuses is perhaps this country's oldest institution. And I know nothing nobler than facing it in honor of the truth when you know that the people holding power have been neutralizing truth since there was wet ink on the Constitution. So know that Tara's truth is something crucial to the movement. And if you see yourself a partner to the revolution, help this country see through all the baseless propaganda through the crux of Joe's illusions. And recognize that TheTaraReade gave everything she had so she could tell us what the truth is. Recognize the decent thing to do when someone bears their soul and shows their bruises is not to ask for context or offer up your own solutions. Your job is just to listen with an honest mind and put yourself on Tara's side a moment so you understand the path she chooses. That there is no instant fame worth the dragging of your name. And if that's what you think, you've a lot to learn about the kind of facts the mob can handle and the kind that it refuses. You've a lot to learn about the news and all its many uses. Guess you've yet to learn the truth the news will serve as fruit from which they've squeezed out all the juices. And we all eat the husk and just pretend it's full of nutrients and isn't really useless. But the jaws of our ability to yield accountability are absolutely toothless.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for your patience. We lost Randy, and I'm really excited to finish the conversation. Hopefully we'll get him back. It looks like he lost his internet, but we are back now live with Caleb Maupin, who is an investigative reporter and also a journalist, author. He's also the founder of CPI, the Center for Political Innovation, and he had a recent interactions with one of my favorite diplomats in the world, who's just amazing, the foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov from Russia. So Caleb, welcome to the show.
Sure. Glad to be here.
It's good to talk to you again. It's been a minute. Sure. New York minute, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to start off with, Reade, can you pull up the SOT with the video of Caleb and Sergei Lavrov? Okay, great. I'll give you a second to do that. Caleb, how many interactions did you get to have with Mr. Lavrov?
Well, I asked him one question. I did a follow-up question, but he didn't really want to answer the follow-up question that I did. That was about China and its role in Ukraine. But he did answer my first question. So, yeah, I guess you have the clip. So there you go.
Yeah. All right. So you got that up, Reade? All right, let's go ahead and play that for the audience so they can see what we're talking about.
Которые касаются российских удобрений, российского зерна. Эти части сделки блокируются западными санкциями. И именно для того, чтобы преодолеть эти санкции и снять препятствия на пути экспорта удобрений и зерна на мировые рынки, работает генеральный секретарь. Он подписался меморандумами делать все возможное для того, чтобы этих целей достичь. Видимо, потребуется невозможное. Пока такого мы не наблюдаем. Ну а что касается перспектив сделки, я только что отвечал вашей коллеге. Действительно, Антонио Гутерреш вчера передал послание президенту Путину. Оно будет доложено, и о реакции будет сообщено.
All right, so there you have it. I'm hoping my mic's back on, Reade, right? We love hot mics. I remember when that happened a few months ago, Reade. Remember that when I was on a hot mic during the intro? That was hilarious.
I don't even want to talk about it.
You never live it down.
Oh, I'm the worst.
You never be dangling with a hot mic because God knows what I'll. Well, everybody knows what I'll be saying because I always say it out loud anyway. So Caleb, tell me, speaking of saying it out loud, you really came out there with a good question for Sergei Lavrov. So what prompted you to ask that particular question?
Well, I was asking about the fact that, this Black Sea grain deal is something that Russia has been working on for quite some time, because there's a number of countries around the world that depend on Russia for grain, for fertilizer, etc. And that because of the sanctions the United States has put on Russia, it's quite hard for Russia to export them. And the United States is trying to blame Russia for that. And Russia's saying, look, we want to export this grain. And so they've been having these negotiations. And every time it seems like they've reached some mechanism for Russia to go ahead and do it. Another port is blocked, another bank is blocked, another corporation gets cold feet and is afraid of doing the transaction. And I basically asked, how much longer is this going to go on? Because we know they're just going to blame Russia for these countries not getting it in American media. That's what they're going to do. They're not going to be honest and say, like, no, we with our sanctions prevented this from happening. And it appears that time after time, Russia has come back to the table and said, look, we need this ship to go to this port. We need this bank to be able to transfer the money here. And the United States says, oh, yeah, sure, we'll let that happen. And then it doesn't happen. Or it does happen, but then there's another mechanism through which these things are blocked. And I mean, it kind of fit in with the overall speech that Lavrov gave at the UN Security Council, or what he basically was saying was that the benefits of a global economy are being eroded and prevented by US efforts to maintain dominance, that we could really see prosperity as a result of the fact that Russia and China and so many countries are trading with each other, building infrastructure, et cetera. But the United States is so determined to remain dominant in the global economy. The United States is so determined not to allow other countries to rise that they are creating an economic crisis that's really hurting many countries in the world, not just Russia. It's hurting Europe primarily. They're the primary victims of this, but many countries around the world are suffering as a result of it. No one's really benefiting, but the United States is just determined to not let other countries step up to the plate, to not see multipolarity. And that was kind of what he was saying, that the World Trade Organization, the International Monetary Fund, a lot of these organizations that are supposed to be, for example, well, I get to an example in a second, but a lot of these international organizations that are supposed to be neutral are being used for geopolitical ends by the United States, and everyone is losing here. A great example of that was the fact that the UN is supposed to be completely neutral, and the United States is obligated to let the UN be the UN, but yet they blocked the visas, of all of the reporters who wanted to accompany Sergei Lavrov. He has a usual press pool.
Wait. Let's dig in there for a second. You're saying that the journalists that were coming from Russia to the United States were blocked. The United States would not allow them to have visas so they could do their jobs.
Yeah, they didn't technically deny the visas, but they just made some, they didn't get completed in time, whatever. And so the press pool that travels around with Lavrov, travels with him around the world to every country he goes. There's certain reporters and journalists from Russian media. They were not able to enter the United States and accompany him. And that's just blatant behavior on the part of the United States. We don't like Russia. And so I guess we have to let the foreign minister come to speak at the UN, but we're going to not let his press pool accompany him. That's absolutely ridiculous. And it's an abuse.
Garbage. That's absolute garbage. That shouldn't have happened. What was his response to that?
He pointed out that this shows an example of the United States abusing the fact that the UN is there. Now, I asked earlier in the day, the UN spokesperson for the Secretary General, Stefan Dujarric, I asked him about this. And I said, doesn't this show that the UN probably shouldn't be in the United States? Because this isn't the first time they've done this. I was covering the Iran nuclear deal. And right after the Iran nuclear deal was signed, Iran picked a new ambassador to the United Nations, a guy named Hamid Abu Talibi. And the United States said, well, we don't like him. We think he's a terrorist. And they blocked his visa. And Iran had to actually pick a new UN representative. Iran was basically denied the right to pick their own UN representative because the United States didn't approve of who they picked. There are many, many examples of this, of the USA basically abusing its privilege of having the UN in the United States.
You make a good point, because I heard from one of the diplomats that they are not allowed, Russian diplomats are not allowed, and I don't know what other countries are included in this, are not allowed to go 24 miles radius outside of the UN in New York City. Did you know that?
Oh, I know this.
They're not allowed to go on vacation. They're not allowed to travel. They're not allowed to see America. Like, they're here and they're not allowed to go anywhere. I mean, imagine, I think New Jersey is the farthest they could probably go, if that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's particularly crazy. And not only do they not get to travel, but if they get close, the FBI will send them a notification, just so you know, we noticed that you were almost 25 miles away as of this date. I mean, it's particularly ridiculous. Whoa. I mean, there was one example of this.
Does that happen to Americans over in Russia? No. They're allowed to travel all over.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the most blatant, abuse of that we saw was, when Gaddafi was still running Libya. He was the president of the African Union in his final years. And so he was to speak at the UN General Assembly. And he actually owned property in a town in upstate New York that was within the 25-mile radius. And so that town passed a city ordinance, like preventing him from sleeping in his own house. This gets to be ridiculous, the way that they pressure foreign leaders. North Korea has no diplomatic relations with the United States, but they do have a UN mission. And right now, New York City is threatening to change the name of the street that their UN mission is, to name it after Otto Warmbier, just as a dig at North Korea for their UN mission. It's crazy how much abuse of the fact that the UN is in the United States goes on. And
maybe
the world
it needs
just has
to be
to take
moved.
it.
Has anyone posed this?
Well, actually, yes. There's been a long time call for the UN to be in India because they feel like that makes sense, because India is somewhat neutral. It's friendly to both Russia and China, as well as the United States. And it's on, the Eurasian, hemisphere, which is important, which is where most of humanity is at this point. Some people have actually, and this is a very interesting proposal, there's been a proposal to put the UN in the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. That has been proposed as well, because that would be the UN making a statement about world peace, right? To have it right between North and South Korea, that would be basically saying if war were to break out, you'd have to destroy the whole UN at the same time. And it would be the UN making clear that they want to see peace between North and South Korea. So there have been different proposals that have been raised over the years. But at the moment, it seems like the UN is in Manhattan. That land was donated by the Rockefeller family, mind you.
There you have it.
Yeah, the founding meetings of the UN were in San Francisco, and then the Rockefellers donated that big chunk of land in Manhattan. It's been there ever since, but there are different proposals for moving it. So I think you're muted. I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. I'm muting because my neighbors have dogs, so I didn't want the audience to have to listen to a bunch of barking dogs in the background. I wanted to go back to the Lavrov when you were there in the press room. Did you observe major Western media there? Were they mostly independent media? And if so, what was their attitude towards him, and what kind of questions did they ask him?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I have some stories about what went on in the press room. Usually it's just standard. People just come in, you sit in your chair, you have your press meeting, whatever, right? So I went in and I was there for the press briefing beforehand with the UN foreign minister, or the UN spokesperson, Stefan Dujarric. And then after that was Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov. So I saved a seat next to me for my producer. My producer wanted to be there for when Lavrov was there. And so I saved a seat for my producer, and I had this seat next to me. So after the first press briefing from the UN spokesperson was over, then a whole lot of mainstream media reporters started coming in because they wanted to be there for Lavrov. And this one reporter came in, I believe he was with the Wall Street Journal, and he was wearing a button that had the name of this Wall Street Journal reporter who's been arrested or something, or in Russia. And he wanted to sit next to me. And I said, no, you are not going to sit next to me with that. I said, no, this is for my producer. I'm saving my seat. And then 2 or 3 other reporters turned around and were insisting that he sit next to me. And I said, no, I'm saving this seat for my producer. You can't sit next to me. And I'm seeing that button, which is a dig at Russia. And I said, no, I'm not going to let you be up at the front and sit next to me in the spot I'm saving for my producer with your anti-Russian button on. And what's particularly interesting is the UN forbids all political statements in the UN. You can't come into the UN with a political T-shirt on. You cannot be wearing political buttons. And earlier, the security at the UN had told the Wall Street Journal guy to take that button off because you can't be demonstrating. What if the Israeli speaker was speaking and someone was wearing a Palestine button? They wouldn't allow that. They don't allow political statements. But so this guy was originally told by the security to take it off. He made a big stink about it, made a big fuss. Oh my God, my freedom of speech is being suppressed. And then he had it on the entire press conference. He had it on, this thing about the Wall Street Journal reporter. Unbelievable, unbelievable. Imagine if I showed up with a button about the Uhuru movement. You think they would have allowed me to have that at the press conference? And the way that they tried to bully me out of my seat, basically, so they could try to get close to Lavrov with a political statement. That was pretty awful. The mainstream press, they're pretty unbelievable. They don't. They all kind of, look, I tell people this, I used to be, I'm in New York City. I'm the New York City reporter for RT. And, I have worked, and at one point I was like working the UN desk for Press TV, the TV network from Iran.
Right.
And I was at the UN every day. So I would go to all the like little socials and receptions that the UN press corps has. And I would talk to these people, and it shocked me because, I went to a small like business school in Ohio. I mean, whatever. I'm from a small town. I went to a small business school, but these would be people sitting next to me who went to Harvard. They went to Yale. They went to like Ivy League schools. These are supposed to be like the smartest people in the country. And I would talk to them about Syria, and they would have no idea that there was another side of the story in Syria. I would talk to them about like Russiagate and all this, and it was like they could not understand that there was more than another side to the story. And I'm like, you're supposed to be the smartest and brightest people. And you meet these people, their understanding is really, really shallow. They know who the good guys are supposed to be. They know who the bad guys are supposed to be. That's all they know about politics. And it was shocking to me. These are supposed to be the smartest people in the country. And they're like, wow, I know a lot of people.
But they're getting big paychecks to basically just toe the State Department line. So what kind of questions did they ask Lavrov?
Oh, they asked him all kinds of questions about nuclear war and I mean, they were asking him questions that were trying to make him look bad, but he handled it quite well. You can watch the whole press conference, and it went on for quite some time. He did a great job. He knows how to handle them very, very well. And Maria Zakharova, who is his press person, she calls on people. She knows people, and they've got a great team there. They know what they're doing. I mean, Russia's been dealing with a hostile Western press for a really long time.
Right.
Right. And they know what they're doing.
Was he able to talk a little bit about, like, for instance, in regards to visas being denied, right, of the journalists that were supposed to be accompanying him? Did he get to talk to the press a little bit about that, or make any kind of press statements? I saw a couple articles about it, but really not too much in the mainstream. And I think it's really remarkable that they actually kept, I just can't believe they kept journalists out. Like, where's our freedom of press? I don't understand.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what he said, essentially. And he said that by blocking him, they were trying to prevent the world from hearing what he had to say, right? They were trying to silence his message, because that's what the reporters who would accompany him would do. They would then amplify what he had to say at the UN and let the world hear it. And by blocking them, they were essentially blocking and silencing him, just like they just recently silenced Tucker Carlson. Right. I mean, they and he commented on Tucker Carlson, which I thought was pretty neat. He actually, from the podium, he talked about Tucker Carlson, which I thought was pretty great as well.
There's one other question that you asked, not of Lavrov, but I think you asked the head of the UN, or one of the heads of one of the delegations, and I can't remember. I'm trying to remember. I apologize. You can tell me who it was. But you asked them about the Uhuru movement group, about being arrested, the 4 Black socialists that have recently been indicted and are facing maybe up to 10 years in prison because they were sowing discord, according to the DOJ. So tell me a little bit about that, and tell our audience a little bit about that.
Well, so I asked Stefan Dujarric, who is the UN spokesperson. He's the spokesperson for the Secretary General. And he had a press briefing right before Lavrov's press briefing. And I asked him that question. And it was about the fact that the Uhuru movement, this group of Black socialists, 3 of their people and 1 guy from another political group called Black Hammer, have been indicted. And the crime is, conspiracy to act as Russian agents or whatever. And if you read it, all they did was have some Zoom calls, write some emails. Like, they're citing routine activity, that I mean, is protected constitutional speech. They're citing that as an example of some kind of, acting as a Russian foreign agent. And in the indictment, they keep accusing them of sowing discord. You gave really eloquent remarks about it when you spoke. I know you were at the event with Diane Sayre. And, I posted that clip because it was a really powerful, comment that you made. I mean, if they can come for them, they can come for anybody at this point,
Absolutely.
I mean, it's so obviously abuse of the Department of Justice, and it fits in with what the Biden administration is doing all around. They're targeting their political opponents with criminal charges, and they're doing it left and right to all kinds of different people. I believe there's a rap artist who they just convicted on similar charges, claiming he was acting as an agent of China because he paid for a photo with Obama or something.
Oh, that's right. I saw that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
crazy. It's craziness. I've never seen it like this in my lifetime, and I know you have it in your lifetime. It's really like gotten hysterical is how I would describe it. But more than hysterical, what are they hiding? They're so desperate. It just shows how desperate they are to silence those of us that want peace. And isn't it amazing that we live in a time, well, and this has happened to other generations too, but we live in a time where you're targeted as a dissident if you believe in peace and you don't believe in war. Isn't that remarkable?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the Democrats aren't even going to have a debate with RFK. Biden won't even have to face off with Marianne Williamson or RFK or any of his critics. Biden is he's the candidate. Kamala Harris, who's even less popular than he is, she's the candidate for vice president. And you have a problem with that? Well, take it up with the Republicans, I guess. I mean, if you're a Democrat, I mean, it's ridiculous. And then it looks like Trump, they've got the criminal proceedings against him. I mean, it looks like we're not even going to have a real election. I mean, it looks like, we're going to get a choice of voting for or against Biden. And it looks like Biden will win, and that'll be that. This sounds like some kind of authoritarian dictatorship, some kind of caricature of what a dictatorship would be like.
Exactly. And of course, they've just allocated last week 1.9 million to re-education and to work with universities and media to stop disinformation, what they consider disinformation. I think we're heading towards what you just said. It's a fascist state, a totalitarian. It's really very frightening, and we're losing our space now because we're facing nuclear war. And like Scott Ritter has made a very good point that we are on the verge of nuclear war right now. And if we lose our freedom of speech, we're not going to even be able to protest it, the road that they're taking to get us there. So it's a very frightening time. But thank you for what you're doing, Caleb.
Thank you.
Where can people find, tell a little bit about Center for Political Innovation. Where can they find information about that and your book?
Oh, sure. Well, the Center for Political Innovation is an educational think tank. We put on conferences, we publish books, we do events. The website is cpiusa.org. That's cpiusa.org, the Center for Political Innovation. We just had a great conference in Washington, D.C. to counter Biden's Summit for Democracy. It's called the Summit Against Hypocrisy. And a documentary about that is coming out in the next week or so. Peter Coffin, the comedian, made a great documentary about our conference. So that'll be up on the web pretty soon. I'm pretty excited about that. That's going to be awesome. Scott Ritter was there, Garland Nixon, some others, and the documentary will be out soon. And my new book is called Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. And I did a great segment about it with Kim Iverson. It went really well. It's getting a lot of good reviews. People are reading it both internationally and domestically. It was highlighted in the Global Times of China, that's like one of the main newspapers in China. They interviewed me about it. So that was pretty cool.
Good.
Yeah. So we're getting the message out there. I will say, I do want to end with this, which is that it looks pretty bleak right now, but you have to remind yourself, how many dissidents are there? There are so many people that can see through this. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's why they're trying to pull the wool over our eyes so badly, is they know that there are just so many people that aren't going along with what they want. And like the Twitter files and everything that's happened, they're scrambling to try and like keep control of this because they've lost control already, I think.
Very good point. Go forth and sow discord, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It was great to have you, Caleb. And
Sure.
we have someone who does that quite well coming up next. Jose.
Oh, he's great.
From the Diane Stair campaign. So we're going to talk about his latest intervention.
Great. Awesome.
So thanks so much, Caleb, and come back soon. Take care.
Anytime. Talk to you soon.
All right.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. So, everyone, we are waiting for Jose Vega, and Reef, do you have him in?
We're going to go to a card and we'll be right back.
Okay, we're going to go to card and just give us a second, audience, while Reef works his magic, and we'll come back with Jose Vega, who can give you some lessons and pointers of how to sow that discord, right?
Stay tuned, folks.
We need.
Okay.
Cavalry ignore that every horse died. Never mind, there's not a single cricket, bird, or horsefly, just triclops in the triage tent who expedite the four-eyed. Norfolk taking pages out the Northwoods, north side. Add a dash of NORAD, plant a row of soil mines, give them lots of black skies and water bright with oil shine, and you can propagate the kind of crop that Gates will normalize. Save your time. Give up ever going back to normal life. Norfolk cut its cost, and now this nation pays the morbid price. Norfolk weighed the loss as purely human, so they rolled the dice, knowing Biden had their backs when workers tried to unionize. Knowing all their lobbyists assured they won't be scrutinized, and knowing that the tiny little fine they might be hit with is a part of doing business when your business is to euthanize. To salt the earth, liquidate the brutalized, drench the plains in acid rain, and blame it all on rural minds. Tell them that's just what they get for voting red, and old Team Blue will fall in step and shake their heads and disconnect from humankind. They're never looking up. Their fingers point to you and I. Thanks to years of being trained to frame the little guy, they've seen the film enough to tell you where the blame should lie. The poorest family's EBT card was the...
Hey everyone, thanks a lot for staying with us. We have this great show that keeps on going and going. So from lately, if you've been watching some of the interventions with some of the progressives and others that are just doing nothing, there was recently one intervention that really caught my eye. It was of some of the bigwigs over at the New York Times and Washington Post and, you know, the legacy media that keeps telling us lie after lie after lie. Well, somebody in the audience decided to speak up, and we have that person with us. First, let's watch this video. Reef, if you could bring that up. Here we go.
I'm looking for the one with Seymour Hersh because it's a policy and press hall event. So shouldn't we be talking about the Nord Stream since that's the biggest story of the century? And you guys, you know, I mean, you have the executive editor of the New York Times there who came out with a phony story to try and block Seymour Hersh. It's just kind of funny how that happened, you know? I mean, did you even acknowledge Seymour Hersh? All of you are executive editors of papers that broke Pentagon, My Lai, Watergate. Is this the same papers or not? I mean, is there anything you've gotten right in the last 20 years, or am I mistaken about that? I mean, it's just kind of funny because Iraq, wrong. Syria, wrong. Russiagate, really wrong. Okay, I mean, the list goes on and on. So the last thing you could do to try and actually fix your reputation is acknowledge that through leaks, we had to find out that Zelensky was going to bomb Moscow on the anniversary. I mean, if you're so impartial, shouldn't you at least say, right, that Zelensky was going to bring us on the verge of World War III? That seems pretty fair. While Julian Assange rots in prison, all of you've got, you know, fat checks because he's in jail for doing your job. And you know what? Tucker Carlson ain't no Seymour Hersh, but he did something you guys are scared to do. Speak the truth and actually be critical of the war, which is why he was actually fired from Fox, because you are all cowards. Every single one of you. None of you have actually had any relevancy. And you know what? The mainstream press is now dying. Nobody's ever going to listen to you again. You have no credibility with the public. The only people who care about what you have to say are elite assholes who have nothing productive to say anymore, and it's dying off. So will you at least say something, either about Nord Stream or Ukraine or the fact that Zelensky brought us to the verge of World War III, and the only reason we knew about that was through leaks? Go ahead. It's a free speech event, right? You guys are the press. Let's say something here. Mr. Khan, come on. You know, you're the executive editor of the New York Times, you know? I'm just trying to get into some good trouble here, man. Woo. Listen, Karen, get out of my face for a second. I got to talk to these gentlemen. Okay. Well, I just want to hear what they have to say. Go ahead. I'm done.
Wait your turn.
You're not going to you. Come.
Wait your turn.
You could project if we can't.
I would just say I think it's important to hear everybody's point of view.
Yeah.
So thank you.
All right.
I do think that we need to give our moderator a chance to ask other questions.
We're on the verge of World War III.
Some of the people in the audience also do so. Thank you.
Let's go.
Really, thank you.
Say something about this bombing. We blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. Listen, don't stand there while there are people rotting in prison. Nobody said anything about Uhuru, right? The socialists who are in jail for being critical of this war. God damn it.
That's it. Let's go. Let's go.
At least say something about the people in jail for being critical of this war. They don't deserve to be in prison right now.
Very powerful. And we have Jose Vega, who was at that event with us tonight. Jose, he's also works on the Diane Sare campaign, as well as his political activism. Welcome, Jose, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm always happy to be on.
First, are you okay? Because it looks like they threw you to the ground and you got injured.
I had a little bruise here that I'm looking at on my knee, but it's okay. I'm okay. It was quite a, being pushed by the Dean of Columbia. I don't think I'm gonna make Dean's List this semester, but we'll see. So, yeah.
Oh my goodness. That was quite an intervention. You said so many really important things. I watched that like 5 times, I have to confess, because I love watching your interventions. And I've had you on my show before, and you're actually teaching people how to use their voices to confront these politicians and media that are not doing their jobs. So could you talk a little bit about what you're doing, that activism that you're trying to, pass on to others?
Yeah. Look, there are 435 congressional districts in the country. Can we get one person in each of these districts to stand up and do what I did? Some people may not know, some people might. This isn't my first rodeo. I've done this to AOC, Jamal Bowman, Nancy Pelosi, Mike Pompeo. The list goes on and on. And that's people just need to start standing up and taking back their country that's been hijacked by fascist and tyrannical forces. That's what I've been saying on all these interviews that I've been getting on, is that I'm trying to kind of, listen, I appreciate the support. Trust me, I appreciate it a lot. A lot of it has gone to me and my little kitty over here. But he's a little grumpy. I'm waking him up from his nap for the interaction. But now I'm turning it over to you, to everybody who's listening to this and will listen to this. And Tara, I'm a big believer that everything we do will influence the future and will be used by the future. So to the kid who feels as if they want to do something to address some kind of injustice 100 years from now, or 50 or 20 or however many years it might be, stand up and call out that injustice that you're seeing right now and experiencing it.
Well, you've been calling it out, that's for sure. And I wanted to, going back to this particular event, usually I've seen you go after progressives, that's how we've seen you do this, but this was different. This was media, legacy media that is notoriously sort of being, they're not even journalists, they're stenographers, let's face it. They're just they're literally writing verbatim press releases. And I think Matt Taibbi, who is being really targeted right now and even threatened with jail by a member of Congress for lifting up the truth about Hamilton 68 and the way we're all being censored on social media, but also how they're crafting the message. And other media outlets, they're not reporting, they're literally just copying down press releases and statements.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, so tell us a little bit about how you got into that event, what drew you, and then any aftermath.
It was an event that was open to the public, first of all. And I do want to make a point, right? It's a 2-day conference. They had a video message from Barack Obama. All the big wigs of the corporate press are there, and they can only get 60 people to come. I mean, the room they got was filled up, but it was a small room. And the registration was still open because it said limited spots only. I was able to reserve the same day. So a friend of mine was able to reserve, half an hour before, right? And registration was still open. So obviously people don't care to hear what they have to say anymore. And so I just got in, I walked in, and the nice, graduate students at the front desk were like, "Hi, what's your name?" And I said, "Jose Vega." And they're like, "We don't see you on the list. Did you register today?" "Yep." "Oh yeah. Oh, here you are. Okay, great." Right upstairs. That's always the moment where I know, okay, great. Then we're coasting. We're good now. We're in. Once you get in, that's it. Now it's just a matter of, what are you going to say? When are you going to say it? And how are you going to say it? And so
I noticed someone intervening with you, like they kept, like, wherever you would go, they would like do this. Who was that person? Was that a journalist or was that some other person?
Some random crazy person who I guess was trying to intimidate me or something. He kept trying to look me in the eyes, but it didn't work, clearly. So yeah.
Kynan was able to get up there and say a few words as well.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about what you're doing in terms with Diane Sare, because I know that you're working with her campaign, and this is kind of going hand in hand, calling these people accountable, because we are at the most dangerous moment in history, one of the most dangerous moments in history right now. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing with her campaign and how this activism kind of loops in with all of that.
What we're doing with Diane's campaign really is trying to revive the American spirit again. And that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But all it means is using the tactics, using the principles founded in the American Revolution and in the civil rights movements of the 60s, because that is American history, whether some people may want to accept that or not. The things that Dr. King did and led his movement is America. And so we're using those kinds of principles and tactics today to take back our government. I was making this point at the conference that you and I were at, that our Congress is bought and paid for. They don't really represent the people anymore. They haven't really. It's for the last 40 years, maybe, if you want to go back that far, right? Definitely in the last 20 years, nobody's been representing it. And you've actually stepped into complete fascism now in the last 20 years, whether it's mass surveillance or, it's the jailing of political dissidents and people like Julian Assange. It's horrible. And what we're doing with the campaign really is trying to get people to stand up, because I believe people get the government they deserve. And as harsh as that sounds, it's also true. If we're not holding them accountable, well, what do we expect? Just to complain on the side? No, we've got to inspire others to stand up and speak out.
Well, you've been a really great voice for the anti-war movement as well. And do you have any thoughts about, because you're in your district, I think you're in, whose district are you in?
Richie Torres.
Okay. What is their position on the proxy war US and NATO is fighting against Russia via Ukraine?
I confronted my congressman on this in a much calmer approach. And he basically said Putin is the second Hitler. So, I mean,
What isn't that ludicrous when it's actually the West that's supporting the Nazis, right?
Exactly.
It made up 14% of the government of the Kiev regime. 14% were Nazis. These Nazi battalions now that are destroying and shelling and terrorizing the civilians in Donbass. And we just had Randy Credico on. And by the way, Randy announced on the show a few minutes ago that he's running against AOC. What do you think of that?
He's going to run as what? As a Democrat, as an independent? Or
he's running as a Democrat, and then he said he'll switch to independent if he, loses the primary or whatever. But in the primary, he's going to run against her so he can debate her.
All right, well, if he wants to win, then he has to work with me. It's that simple. I'd be happy to work with him. I know he's not super friendly to me or my organization, but, if he really wants to bring back the American Revolution and spirit, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson abhorred each other. They absolutely hated each other so much. But Alexander Hamilton endorsed Thomas Jefferson once, and said, I'd rather have this guy instead of the other guy as our president,
it's time for us to put aside any kind of biases or ideas. If he may have he talked yesterday, he was on Kim's show and he mentioned he was going to have Diane Sare on his show. So we'll hold him
Randy
to that.
Credico said that?
Yes, he did. He said, I talked to him and I had just been at that event with Scott Ritter and we talked about what's important. And he wanted to, and he's also senior interventions. I think people are seeing, they kind of got, believed some of the smears about the LaRouche movement. And now I think people have realized that it's changed in the way that it didn't even have to change that much. A lot of those were smears that were done simply to marginalize the group, right?
Of course, exactly.
Which is what happens to any of us that speak up. We get smeared, personally attacked, and delegitimized as much as they can possibly do it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm not asking people to join my organization. I'm asking them to stand up for what they believe in.
Exactly. Exactly. And we appreciate that. So anyway, so we'll hold him to that, and hopefully he'll have a Diane Sare on. But so going forward though, with closing thoughts, what would you like to leave the audience with, and how they can find you, and how they can like take steps, moving forward here?
Well, first thing I'll say is, Randy, if it's true you'll have Diane on, I will help you get all the signatures you need, and I will campaign for you, with you. I will be your biggest advocate. I will bring up your name in every intervention if you actually do work with us, and you can hold me to that. Anybody who will work with us, I will make sure you fly, brother. So there's that.
I will tell him.
And secondly, I guess people can find me on my Twitter at HoseBTrigga. That's JOSBTRIGGA. It's that name because Hose A was taken, so I had to do Hose B, and Trigga because I was like 14 or 15 when I made my Twitter.
I love it.
Yeah, right. So, I was young and dumb. I'm still young and dumb, but a little less dumb than I was. But
you're a cat dad now, so
Yeah, I have to mature. I have to get smarter now. Oh,
right.
Yeah, exactly.
To be a cat dad.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a cat daddy. Yeah. So people can follow me there. They can get on my patreon.com/declaring independence or my YouTube channel, Declaring Independence.
Great. And I know a lot of us are getting strikes and problems with YouTube lately. Kim Iverson just got a strike yesterday. Mine's been deplatformed, demonetized, a few of the videos. I think INN, Indie News Network, has been stricken. Is that true, Reade?
Yeah, we're in YouTube jail for 2 weeks. So
okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're coming after us right and left. So we need to find ways to get our voices heard. I'm on Rumble. We're live right now on Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, other platforms that do not Rockfin, and that don't censor and that don't, try to keep our voices silent. So before you leave, real quick, Reef, do we have any questions for Jose?
Yeah, we got a couple. Let me look for a good one.
Live audience.
I mean, we've had a couple. I just had to choose which one. I think the Nord Stream was.
Okay.
Who do you think who did the Nord Stream pipeline? What's your guess?
Oh man, I don't know. See, it's so funny. I think it was Ukrainian nationals. Yeah, I think it was Ukrainian nationals who took a yacht, and they were just
right,
like,
it was a yacht.
Yeah, wouldn't it be crazy if we just blew up a major piece of critical infrastructure right now, guys? I just happen to have some homemade explosives with me, and we are all expert divers who can, because only a handful of divers in the world can actually make that dive. So, I'm one of us is on that boat, right? Yeah. No.
But thank you.
Anyway, yeah. So
as a person named Reef who has been diving for a while,
right.
that was not at night. 300, 200 plus feet dive with right. Multiple tanks, multiple hours underwater. If not, you're gonna end up with the bins.
Right, exactly.
That's okay. No one knew that was happening. No one saw you getting the specially high ox mix that someone's gonna ask questions.
Well, what's amazing is you brought up Tucker early on, and he talked about Cy Hirsch's reporting, and he actually raised up the issue a couple of times. He also brought up the issue, which we haven't. I wanted to bring it up on the show real quick. What were your thoughts on the 51 CIA agents that signed off on a letter to silence the Hunter Biden laptop story? And then they admitted in the testimony that they wanted Biden to win. By the way, I was an intern for Leon Panetta, and he was one of the signatories on that letter. He's also on the board of Raytheon. So,
anyway. I actually, I see this apparatus going back to your case, how you were sexually assaulted. I don't know if we can say that on YouTube because of the. Of
course, yeah, you can say it here. It's fine.
Okay, yeah. But, the fact that, Joe Biden did that and was able to mop it up and sweep it up. And then when you brought it back at a time when Me Too came out, right, and everybody was rallying around, oh, yeah, Me Too, the conservatives and the Republicans. Well, what about the head honcho? Nothing. It just goes to show you that this apparatus continues to exist. And it's disgusting, right? That politicians can just call up some people and say, hey, listen, I need this swept under the dirt. What's the best way we can clean this or make it look like it's Russian disinfo or Russian compromat, right? It's horrible. And, Seymour Hersh actually commented on it before the 50 signatories. He said, I wouldn't touch the Hunter Biden laptop because fathers will go to lengths to defend their sons. Okay. And he said, so I knew about this. and I knew what they were going to do. And I said, let someone else do that, because I'm not trying to be, under Joe Biden's target right now.
And he does target. He's been weaponizing the whole DOJ. And as my audience knows, who knows and follows me, my communications were all taken under sealed warrant. There was a grand jury impaneled. Now, they didn't indict me. However, they have indicted the Hoover Group and 4 members of the Black Socialists who are now facing prison under the FARA Act, which is the Foreign Agent Relations. And it is really an administrative act. Basically, you're supposed to register as a foreign agent, and they're not. They're Americans. They're Black activists, have been doing it for 50 years. They're not being influenced by anyone. It's a sham, and it's a test case, in my opinion, to see if they can silence speech. So, Jose, have you gotten any pushback from the FBI or DOJ or anything like that? Or have you been allowed to, so far, do what you're doing and be active and I know that you stay within certain parameters, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, the only pushback I got was after I confronted Hakeem Jeffries on Nord Stream. I got a call from DC Capitol Police, mind you, for an event that happened in New York. And they asked me questions like, were you going to do this again? What was your intention? What would have happened if you weren't escorted out? It's like, you can call my lawyer, okay, and figure that out. Because I'm not talking to you. And never talk to the feds, kids, okay? Unless there's a lawyer present, say nothing to them. You say, I don't know what you're talking about. Call my lawyer. You don't have a lawyer, they provide one for you. That's well within your rights. So, I don't care if you're arrested or whatever you just did, get a lawyer first. So that's the only pushback I've gotten.
Interesting. And it's tough to know because I know when in 2020, back in the day when I got a bunch of death threats all at once, someone showed up at the property, someone tried to take my horse, a bunch of drama. Oh my God. Right? So I go to law enforcement thinking they're helping me. And no. And then they opened a case on me, right?
Oh my God.
So we found out, and it's been public, that one of the reasons, apparently, according to this journalist, and I don't have the verification for this, because I still don't know what they were putting me under surveillance for. Was it to help me, hurt me? Was I swept up in another case? I have no idea to this day. It's sealed, and I'm not allowed to know. My lawyer tried to find out, couldn't find out. But what a journalist said is what they found out was that Joe Biden's the campaign and the administration wanted to know what reporters were talking to me and what they were saying. And wow. So again, that goes to what you were saying earlier about the Hunter laptops. So we have these huge things. The Biden, and I don't know if he's cognitive enough to be this diabolical, but the people around him really want to hold on to that power. That's the problem.
We've seen examples of when they kind of let something slip by on Biden, which I think is a way to kind of keep him in control. Like when the New York Times admitted, no, actually the Hunter Biden laptop is legit. There are legit things to it, right? When that came out, I was thinking why would they admit this? Because this is really controlled, right? I think it's also the case that maybe Joe Biden was not going along with something behind the doors. He's like, really, Joe? Hey, it just so happens we just confirmed that your son's a fucking degenerate. So, yeah.
Exactly. So where do you go from here, Jose? What's going on with the work that you're doing in activism, and leave us with some parting words.
Well, like I said, I want other people to start standing up and doing this. Do it in your district. Get a friend to do it with you. Get me 435 interventions and I will run for Congress. That's my condition right there. Because people keep asking me, run for Congress. I don't want people to stand behind me and watch me do something. I want to inspire you to do something, right? So if you could do that, if you could fulfill that condition of 435, and I'll help you do it. We do classes, we're working on it. You got 15 out the way. I'll count my 15 as part of that 435. So now you got 420 left to go. So go for it.
Sounds like good, solid advice. Well, thank you for being with us, Jose, and everyone can follow you on social media and follow the Dare campaign. And, good luck to your future. And it was really fun being at the event with you. So that's it, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the Politics of Survival. This was a good show. It was really eventful, and I'm sorry that we lost Randy so suddenly. It looked like his internet went out, but really good news that he's going to run, and we'll have to, find out more about that next time we have him on. So thank you, Jose. And I want to say a shout out to Caleb for coming on, and to Randy. Thanks everyone for joining. See you next time.
Thank you.